Okay, so. Okay. Well, hello and welcome everyone to our Voices in Perspective series. Our title today is Black Women Leading the Discourse on Black Lives. My name is Acacia Warren and I'm the Single Subject Coordinator for the Master of Arts in Teaching and Credential Program at UC Irvine. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Susan Tomabergi, and I'm the coordinator of the multiple subject program, so Acacia's counterpart in the MAT program.
And we would like to start with some acknowledgements, the first being our dean, Richard Aram. We'd like to thank him for leading us through a very unprecedented year in education. And we'd also like to acknowledge Liz Pena. She is the Dean of Faculty Development and Diversity. Both Liz and Richard have been very supportive of the Voices in Perspective series, and we're grateful for their leadership.
We'd also like to thank the UCI Communications team, Ryan Hedkowski and Carol Jean Tomoguchi Perez. They've been instrumental in helping to publicize this event and spread awareness about this event. So thank you to Ryan and Carol Jean.
Okay, so this webinar series highlights, honors, and contextualizes the lived experiences of each panelist. We aim to heighten awareness and agency around critical topics such as racial justice, equity, culture, and education. So during this series, we want to listen, learn, and grow from the experiences of others.
All right, we'd also like to acknowledge those of you in the audience. A great majority of you are teachers and educators at the K-12 level, elementary, middle, and high school, and at the university level, both undergraduate and the graduate level. We also want to acknowledge colleagues, family, and friends of our panelists. We welcome those of you who are tuning in to learn more about our panelists and their education and their experiences within the education system.
Okay, and the audience is encouraged to use the chat feature for affirmations and connections shared throughout the webinar. So if a panelist says something that resonates with you, feel free to go ahead and share that in the chat. It's our equivalent of snapping your fingers when somebody says something that really resonates with you. So we had to, we're adapting in virtual ways. So please feel free to use the chat for that.
All right, and if there's time at the end, we will have some Q&A from the audience. However, the goal of this webinar is to listen and to learn from our panelists. As such, there might not be time for Q&A. We are planning on recording. We are recording the event, and the recording will be posted on the UCI MAT website. So I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay, so we're going to start with introductions, and I'm going to ask our panelists to please mute themselves when they're not speaking, and then just to prevent feedback for the recording, and then just to remember to unmute yourself when you are speaking. So at this time, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves by stating their name and how they wish to be addressed throughout the webinar. We want each of you to say a little bit about what you do professionally, share the college or colleges that you attended, and share who you would like to dedicate this webinar to in honor of Black History Month. So we will start with Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much. So my name is Dr. Adana Brown. You can refer to me as Adana, Dr. Brown, whatever feels comfortable for you. I am the superintendent of Local District West in Los Angeles Unified School District. So LA Unified is broken up into 6 sub-districts, and my district covers 155 schools that I supervise, 70,000 students. We have the largest population of Black students in my local district. My area covers South Central Los Angeles, all the way to West Hollywood, Malibu area. The colleges I attended. So I attended UCLA for undergrad. I went to get my a master's degree in human genetics. I was on the pre-med path, and then I came back to UCLA and got my doctorate in education. When I really figured out this is where my passion was, and I donate. I really want to. Not donate, dedicate this, today, this Black History Month moment to my dad. My dad was an educator who came from Atlanta, Georgia, by way of Louisiana. And he was the first African-American counselor, dean, and administrator at his school in Monrovia Unified in California. So really proud of the things that I accomplished. He kind of pushed me into education. He passed away right before President Obama was elected, and that was the last question he asked me was, did the Black man win? And I was like, not yet, Daddy. But he passed away right before he got to see that happen. So today is for him.
Thank you. And we will go with our second person, Dr. Cuthbert.
Thank you. You can call me, honestly, Dr. Cochran, because I'm still paying off those student loans and the cost for it. But I'm gonna give you a little more background about me, not just my college experience. I graduated from Manual Arts High School, South Central Los Angeles. And I got my degree, my bachelor's from Fresno State, my master's in education from the American Intercontinental University, and my doctorate in education from University of Southern California. And I remember going through high school thinking that I would never, ever be able to get my degree from USC because, it's known for the University of Spoiled Children. So I worked very hard to get that, but I did not do it on my own because my counselor at the time did not think I was college material, didn't have the best grades. But I dedicate this to my mother and all of my ancestors, because if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for my friends and family that motivated me, because it definitely wasn't my intellect, but it was the motivation and tenacity that helped get me through these years. So I do this for the kids. I do this for the Black students to let them know that you can do this. So I am the executive director for Black Students of California United. I've been in that role since November, but I've always volunteered in different organizations and along with them to just support in any way possible, because I have 2 Black sons. And I think that it's important to think about the rest of the children out there too. Mine were privileged because they have a mother and father who are educated, and everyone around them are educated. Most of our kids don't have that story. So it's important for me to be a part of changing their story and supporting their story.
Okay, thank you. And we will go with our third panelist.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kathy Croatia. Please call me Kathy. I'm fine with that, or Dr. C, it's fine either way. And I am currently working at the University of Southern California, and I'm the Director of Accreditation and Credentialing. So what that means is all of the state and federal accreditation reporting things, I have to kind of manage and report on annually, and of course within our 7-year cycles. I also serve on the Commission of Accreditation at the CCTC level. So, colleges or universities or teacher prep programs that are coming through accreditation for the state, for the CCTC, I'm on that panel that says yay or nay. And also I have come from, oh boy, many careers, but I worked in LAUSD as a special ed teacher. Before that, I worked in the steel industry, which in and of itself is quite a story. There are none of us in the steel industry. Not a one, it seems as if. I went to the United States Air Force Academy. I also went to Cal State University Long Beach. I have a master's degree from Marshall School of Business at USC in entrepreneurship and marketing. And I came back to USC to get my EDD in urban education. So that is kind of who I am. I would like to dedicate this to my grandmother, who, even though my father was an educator as well, but my grandmother was really the first educator that I really knew as a teacher. She was a kindergarten teacher. She's half Native American and half Black, and she raised 5, she's twice widowed, raised 5 kids on her own. So I dedicate this to her. She had such wonderful warmth and love when it came to teaching. And she, you never know what you are seeing in a teacher until you are older, years and years later. And so now I'm kind of able to look back at the way she taught and the way she interacted with myself and every other child. And it was just so loving and so giving. And so I dedicate this to her.
Okay, and unfortunately, we have a panelist who's not able to join us. And so we'll go to our next panelist, Dr. Thomas Miner.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Erica, Dr. Erica Thomas Miner. I go by Erica or Dr. Thomas, whichever one is easiest. I am the principal at Manual Arts High School, my fellow toiler that's on the call here today. I have been principal at Manual Arts High School for the last 6 years, but I've been at Manual Arts High School for the last 10 years. I was an assistant principal there 4 years before I took on the principalship. I've been in LAUSD a little over 20 years. I started off as a chemistry teacher and then a coordinator, and then moved on to continue out of classroom positions. Just a little bit about myself. My background sounds so much like some of you all as well. I was a middle of the road high school student, never got called into the college counseling office, graduated, went straight to community college, Riverside Community College. I graduated in 2 years, transferred to Cal State Long Beach, where I thought I wanted to be a MD as well, hence the degree in biochemistry, until I got to be a senior and I took my advanced physiology class and had to handle a cadaver. And at that point, I realized that, no, I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't even have the stomach for it. So that led me to quickly wrap up that inspiration and aspiration and move on to something that was more of a fit for me, which was teaching. So I've been in education ever since. And I started off teaching, but even before then in college, I was a math tutor, an avid tutor, and things of that nature. I would like to dedicate today to, well, twofold. One, my father, who passed away January 29th last year after a 20-year battle with kidney cancer. We were so blessed to have him as many years as we did battling that disease. And he was a computer scientist. He was a computer scientist engineer, and worked for Northrop Grumman, TRW, when it was TRW. And he taught me everything I knew in terms of the sciences and math, and really encouraged me, to do my best in those areas. And that's where he could support me, and that's what he did. And so that's the first. The second would be my 4 kids. I have 2 little boys, as you all saw in the picture, which is probably going to force me to have my camera off most of the time. So forgive me, everyone. I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they are inspiration to me every day. My sons, and I also have 2 daughters, 17-year-old twins. One just got accepted to NYU 2 days ago on full scholarship, and we're extremely proud of her. Waiting on where for the other twin, but just dedicating this to them and letting them know that great things are in store for you. No matter what you want to do, you just keep at it, and good things come. And life is all about good and bad. We take things one day at a time, and we do the best that we can with what we can. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
Okay, thank you. And our final panelist, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Julie Washington. You can call me Julie or Dr. Washington. And I grew up in Seattle. I'm like the non-Californian here. I grew up in Seattle, and I left Seattle and went to Spelman College in Atlanta, where I got a degree in English. And from Spelman, I went into graduate school at the University of Michigan and got my master's degree and my PhD in speech and language pathology. So I'm a speech pathologist. And I just to UCI about 6 weeks ago. I came here from Atlanta, Georgia State University. And I want to dedicate this to my parents, of course, but also my pastor in Seattle, Reverend Samuel McKinney, who was the person who told me to go away, don't stay home. He went to Morehouse. I stayed at Seattle University for 2 years trying to stay close to home. He convinced me to leave and change the course of my life and the life of my family. He was a Morehouse graduate. Now I have a Morehouse graduate and I married a Morehouse man. And so it really changed my trajectory, and I did things very differently as a result of his influence. And he passed away last year, but he is much loved by many of us. Almost all the women I knew at Spelman who were from Seattle were there because of him. And so he was a real influence for us. And my dad, who was a high school history teacher throughout my life, he was very supportive, except for when I was a doctoral student. He asked me after I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, do you need help? Do you need to see somebody? Are you one of those people who just goes to school to keep from getting a job? It's like, no, I'm getting a PhD. He didn't understand what it was. And so he dogged me. And about 5 years ago, he apologized because he's like, if I had had the kind of influences that you had and the opportunities, I think I would have made a good college professor. And I believe he would have. And so I'm grateful for those opportunities.
Thank you. So at this time, we have a series of questions that we're going to ask each of our panelists. And so I will start by asking a question, and I'm going to ask my panelists to just naturally ease into answering the question when it's your turn. So instead of calling on you each time, just know who's before you and who comes before you, who's after you. So we'll start with Dr. Brown. And the first question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in education?
Absolutely. So I became a single mom at 17. So throughout my freshman year at UCLA, I was, had my son with me. We were going to school together. I found a childcare facility on UCLA's campus. So just had him in tow, right? And teaching kind of became a sustainability for me as I was still trying to prepare for medical school. And as I became more and more involved in education and just, getting involved with children and changing their lives and how I wanted my son's life to be affected, it became really rewarding for me. I really began to value the relationships I had with students and how they depended on me being there every day at work. And so I had, never really had that dependence on a person before. I never even had a Black teacher. So that was important for me as well, for children to see someone that looked like them, that cared about them, that really mirrored that academic excellence in their presence. And I have 3 more boys, so I have 4 boys. And so education is so important for me as I sit here and think about, my trajectory as a teacher, as a coordinator, and so on and so forth. So really planning out, what is it that I want for my own kids, and how do I really support teachers and principals in that way, you know, so that kids look at, you know, we treat every kid as our own. You know, they need to come home and say, you know, I was excited today about learning, and just as I would want my own kids to come home and have that same passion about what they learned today, that is how we want to embrace education. So for me, it's become a way of life. It's something that I want to push forward with my kids, but also for other people's children to make that impact, and really just I love it. I wake up every day, and it's a job that I honestly would do for free. And that's what I want to impart upon my kids. If you won't do this for free and you don't want to get up in the morning and do this job, then don't do it. But, you know, I truly love what I do. I truly love making an impact and changing the lives and trajectory of children.
Is it me? Is it my turn? I want to make sure. Okay, yes. Okay, I thought so. All right. So, what inspired me to pursue education? Honestly, it was the experience I had when I first went to Fresno State. I realized that I did not know how to write a complete sentence or write a paragraph. And I had to take remedial classes. And so I decided to get a degree in English just to spite, you know, the fact that I did not get what I needed. And I said, oh, you know what, I want to be a teacher. I thought I wanted to be in K-12. And after my first, I went to have to do an observation. Of course, they put me in like one of the worst areas in the city. And I was like, oh, no, I can't do this. But what I do want to do is I want to help teachers. And so I went on, and I've always worked in education as an administrator or working with the grant funds. And then I went on to just giving me opportunities. I ended up teaching in higher ed. But my volunteering it always brought me back to education because I felt like I don't want someone to experience what I experienced. And so if I could just help one student, and then I had parents around me who really supported me in the sense that my father had an 8th grade education and my mother had a high school diploma, but they believed, even though we were bringing home B's and C's, they just thought we were just, you know, pie in the sky, the best thing that ever happened, and just believed that I could do more. And so they supported me and encouraged me. And I didn't even think about it until one day my dad said, do you want to, I think you should go to college. I went to this place in Fresno, and he, coming from Los Angeles, you know, concrete, going to Fresno at the time, he thought, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful and trees. And he moved heaven and earth to get me into the EOP program and to get me into Fresno State. And so his whole life, you know, never going past his 8th grade education and being an entrepreneur, he supported me and my sister and my brother. And my brother, he's an attorney now. And it was just because we had that support. And I believe that every kid needs a chance or an opportunity. And so I just fell in love with education, just fell in love with it.
So, as I was saying before, I came from a different industry. I had always volunteered. I mean, I was a youth director for a church. I was a choir director for a different church. I was a math tutor for young kids. I've done a lot of different things, you know, through my life, and have always had a hand in, you know, volunteering as an educator. And so I was never really far away from it, but it was not really my career path at the time. But when I was working for the steel industry, I just really got to a point where I wanted to do something that mattered. I was in marketing, and I was a contract negotiator for special temperature high steel alloys. And I had worked for all 3 of the largest American metal companies, and realized that I was giving my best to an industry that would never see me as an equal to my white male counterparts. And I really wanted to work where what I was doing had more value. And I've always loved, you know, like I said, I've always loved kids, always loved teaching. And I just got to a point in my life where I thought it was time to make a change. And I thought, well, what is it that I have always done and always loved? And that was teaching. I'd always loved working with kids of various ages. And I also saw that there was just a huge need for teachers. And when I was making my career transition, I was a paraprofessional for a severely handicapped school. And just watching those students and watching their families and how hard it was for them to get, high quality education. And I just thought, we all deserve the best that this country can give. And so I wanted to do that.
And I will say that I was a middle of the road student. Opportunity to, like I said before, be an avid tutor and a math tutor when I was in community college. I think what I noticed once I transferred to Cal State Long Beach to do my undergraduate work was that there were limited resources for minority students who wanted to go into STEM education or STEM at all. So I was the only Black person in my whole department at Cal State Long Beach in the biochemistry department. It was very difficult for me to get the resources that I needed to be successful. I was seeing a lot of where my counterparts had taken these classes in high school. They had taken chemistry in high school. They had taken calculus in high school. And I hadn't done any of that work. I was just seeing all of that stuff for the first time. And I realized how many of my Black counterparts didn't have those same resources that didn't have the resources that I was missing as well. And so I wanted to be able to make that connection for students. Why are so many of us not in STEM? Why is it that so many of us don't like? I think it's because we don't necessarily like it. I think that's the best way we can say it, but I think it's because we just don't have the resources to help us be more successful. And I wanted to be that bridge, and I wanted to help in that. And so I went into science education. Could you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
My focus is reading, and it always has been, even as a student. I don't know how many people know the movie Matilda, about the little girl with the bad parents who is like really bright. Well, I always say I was like Matilda in that when I got off school every day, I went straight to the Seattle Public Library because I was a latchkey kid. Didn't like to be home by myself. So I went to the library, I did my homework, I read, and reading opened so many doors for me and made so much possible for me. And then when I started working in schools, when I was in Michigan, I realized how many kids were struggling with reading and how reading was a real area of difficulty, and especially for Black kids and Black kids who were poor. And we just weren't succeeding really at teaching them how to read. And yet one of the things that we know is that the absence of literacy is so important in this country for everything. And the absence of literacy really puts a ceiling on your life. And so one of the things that became my focus. My whole focus is Black kids need to be reading. And why aren't they reading? And what should we be doing differently? And how do we turn that around? I think everybody in this meeting knows how important being educated was to ending up in this conversation today and having a voice. And that starts with those foundational skills like reading and math and writing. And so my goal was to make kids love reading as much as I do. I mean, we do a lot of reading instruction, and it's great. Kids need really good reading instruction, but I want to see kids have a love of reading and have the ability to read. If you're not reading, I want it to be because you don't want to, not because you can't. And so that's why I went into education. It really is all about reading and making sure that kids have the opportunities and that there's more an equitable path to whatever you want to do. So that's what got me into education. I never thought I would be. I was raised by educators. My mother was a music teacher. My father was a history teacher. Never thought that's what I would be doing, but it was in my blood, and it matters for kids to have the option If you choose not to, that's fine, but it should be a choice.
Thank you for sharing what inspired you to join education. Now, as leaders in your profession, how do you address equity and racial injustice with your students and staff? So same order.
Thank you. So I think for me, in my position currently, it's about calling it out, right? Really calling it out, being unapologetic about it. I talk to my principals. Right now we're in the middle of budget development where they're starting to figure out their budgets for the next school year. So I really, start every meeting with data and saying, how is it that you are making sure that every Black child is taking advantage of AP courses? How are you identifying students for gifted? We can't be the gatekeepers of the classes that hold our students back. Right. And so I just had this conversation the other day with our superintendent, Superintendent Buettner, in that there's a budget in Sacramento for everybody. There's a budget for special education, which we know Black students are a part of that. We know there's a budget for Title III and EL dollars, and there's a master plan for our EL students who need to redesignate. But there is no budget for Black students specifically, even though this is the most marginalized, underperforming group that has been dictated by data, right? And so really putting the money where we know the deficiencies lie. How do we make sure that schools have what they need? How do we make sure that grading does not become subjective? Right? How do we, I hear people all the time talk about, well, the kids don't have their cameras on, and so I talk to teachers all the time. I say, is that the hill you want to die on? So what, they don't have their camera on? Are they working? Are they learning? Are you teaching? So we can't make it about they have a hood on today, or, Lakeisha has a scarf on, so I got to send her out. So what? How do we really make it about what it's about, which is about learning? They're there. And so really being intentional about the professional development that we give, making sure that we weave in literature that our students see themselves in, right? We can't teach about going to the beach or going surfing in the literature when our students have never had those experiences. They're not going to identify with that. So really being intentional about professional development, how we develop our budget, how we develop our master, which is the classes and programs students into. And so that is what I really call out to our teachers, to our staff, to our principals, and being unapologetic about it. It is okay to address the deficiencies that Black students have without saying, I'm sorry for focusing on this particular group.
Dr. Brown, I want to just thank you for saying that, because I just had a conversation today about calling them out, because I was at a meeting yesterday for Madera Unified School District and with their BSU, and their concern was how to call it out. And what we were saying is that you cannot call it out without documentation. So I'm trying to teach our kids that, give them the voice, teach them how to document, how to do these in their own way, and and so empowering them. My background is equity. I work on unconscious bias. That's where I spend my time. I go into not just the classrooms, into the banks, into the school systems, and I do those trainings with the educators, but I also train our students to have their voice and be loud and proud about it. And like you said, unapologetic about it, especially knowing that there is a problem, and let's call it out. We had an issue in Fresno where a Black student said, this is happening to me. And the district wanted to take that particular part down because we think we're doing our part. No, we're not taking it down. You need to hear this, and you need to be uncomfortable, because our kids are uncomfortable all the time. And so my goal is to continue to empower and train our students and give them back their voices. And they have a much bigger voice than we did. I would have been too shy to say the things that they say nowadays, but I'm proud of them. So I want them to give them a voice and then pull up those behind them as they prepare for their future. And so we have to say, yes, call it out. Hashtag, we're gonna call this out. And so we're trying to empower them and give their advisors training so they can know that, hey, we are, and we're not just a small group. And that's the problem we're having. Our kids outside of LA County, which is a very large, one of the largest school districts with Black students, but in the other school districts where they're only like 500, but then they have like a 20% suspension rate. Or like you said, those numbers are so disproportionate, it's ridiculous. And so my thing is like, we have to put the power back into our students' hands as well, because I feel like they get more accomplished than we can. So it's just, my goal is to just look at it, and sometimes it's just one by one, but just know that they're not alone and give them like a platform. So if it's 500 at this school, then let's just do the whole county and let's put them all together and let's get our voices heard and make some change.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, head on. That's the only way to do it, is head on. And, you know, as a supervisor, you know, I try to make sure that I have a relationship with my staff where we can openly discuss all of these topics. I have a fairly diverse staff. So, you know, we talk about all things. I mean, this whole issue with, you know, the attacks on Asian Americans right now, just, you know, it's insane. You know, and again, just making sure that we have these conversations and they are honest. And I try to make sure that, you know, we talk about how what we do connects with this narrative of making sure that we are doing our best as an institution to really stop some of these inequalities. And the one thing with this pandemic, it has really, really shown exactly where all of this stuff is. Not that some of us didn't know, but now there's a lot of literature and there's a lot of factual in your face evidence that is showing all of these inequities and how exacerbated it is. And so making sure that each time we start talking about standards and we start talking about accreditation, you know, it's not just checking a box. How does this standard actually affect a kid in a classroom? How do we empower our teachers to make sure that they understand how this whole world works? You know, for the longest time, there's been this divide between higher ed and the classroom, and we have to stop all that. And I think it's just really important to have these honest and open conversations, and, you know, making sure that everybody is qualified, and making sure that we build systems in teacher prep that make sure all of our teachers are qualified for all of our students. And that's with their dispositions as well as their cognitive knowledge.
So I think that we definitely, I mean, I agree with everything that everyone else is saying. But I think one of the things that I also do as a school site principal is I make it a point to ensure that racism and equity are part of conversations on a regular basis with my staff. The kids know when they feel as if they are in situations where they are not being treated fairly. And a lot of times they can sense whether or not it may be biases or racism that are impacting the way teachers are treating them, interacting with them, speaking with them. And so I have to make sure that on a regular basis, I have staff professional development that's regular, not once a year, not once a semester. We do it every month. I have race and equity professional development in addition to a race and equity task force on my campus in which teachers are working specifically to address the needs of African-American Black students. Now, that doesn't mean that race and equity doesn't mean all students. I work at Manual Arts High School and all of my students are Black and Brown students. So race and equity also extends to all of my students, Black and Brown. It's continuing to have those conversations and educate the staff in terms of their own biases and how they are working with our students. In addition to that, it's important to give the students voice. I remember one year, a couple of years ago, I had students actually present to teachers, Black students present to teachers at a faculty meeting some of the issues that they had with teachers. And you would be surprised. The students were saying things like, you know, this teacher knows our names. the end of the school. They look at us. They just small things that we wouldn't even think about. It puts teachers in a real uncomfortable situation, but it's a conversation we need to have. And so we can't shy away from these issues. We can't shy away from racism, equity. It has to be a meaningful conversation. And then there has to be meaningful steps to address the issues at hand. We can't just talk about it like the kids see about it. We have to talk about it and be about it. So not only having the discussions, but really putting in place systems that address the inequities that inherently built in our educational system. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about the fact that, you know, we, knowing what we know about the system, continue to foster equity for our students and our in our environments. And so I think that those are important key factors that I try to sustain on my campus.
The two words that I've heard used a lot, Adana said them first, that govern the way I operate are unapologetic and intentional. And I am a speech pathologist, and I don't know how many people know that speech pathology is the fourth whitest profession in the United States, according to The Atlantic, preceded only by veterinarians, farmers, miners. That's 1, 2, and 3, and then speech pathology. Which is ridiculous because a lot of the students that we see in schools who are receiving the services are Black and brown students. And so they are not seeing clinicians who look like them, or often who are not sympathetic to their needs as communicators. And so, you know, I said I came here from Atlanta, and people are like, oh, Atlanta, you know, why aren't you in Atlanta? Atlanta is very diverse, but that doesn't extend to the university. It is true in the city. The city is 51% African American, but when I got to Georgia State in my department, there were 2 African American students out of 65. And that's unconscionable. In a city like that, it didn't reflect the city, it doesn't reflect the university at the undergraduate level, it doesn't reflect the discipline. And so it was really important for me, and I really believe in it, was to go in and take the staff with me. Let's identify what the barriers are. Don't tell me that there are no qualified applicants. There are. What are the barriers in the admissions process that are keeping these students out? Let's figure out what they are. We have the data, figure out what it is, and then remove the barriers. And so we had to be very intentional about identifying the barriers. And I had to be, as chair, unapologetic about addressing the barriers, because everybody wasn't always with me. And the belief that someone said this to me the other day, that a focus on a particular group of students is not equality. And my response to that is, until we have equity, we can't even talk about equality. And there is no equity. And so what I was trying to do was create equity in the process intentionally. And then I'm unapologetic about it. There is no reason to have any institution where we are not represented in numbers that reflect our brilliance as a people.
Okay, thank you for emphasizing our need to be deliberate in addressing equity and racial justice issues, in particular, those that pertain to our Black students. This next question I'd like to ask is, what particular aspect of the Black Lives Matter movement resonates with you the most? And we'll start with Dr. Brown.
So right in the height of all of the protests, I think around June, I was asked by the city where I live to speak at a protest. And so I didn't know what I was going to say until like the night before. And I prayed about it, and, you know, just like God just said, let it come from your heart. And so I really spoke about my 4 sons and the PTSD that we as Black parents experience, you know, when our children leave the house. I have a 25-year-old now. And the day he got his license, he was 16, he was pulled over right after he got his license. And there was a there was a white cop and there was an Asian cop. White cop comes up to the car and says, "Oh, your tail light's out." And so, not knowing that my husband was in the car, because my husband looked as young as my son, he says, "That can't be true because we just came from the DMV." And the man's all, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm his dad." And then the other guy comes up and says, "Oh, well, there was a robbery down the street and your car fits the profile." And so when my son comes home, I said, "Welcome to being Black." I said, "This is your first experience. Thank God your dad was in the car with you." I said, "But next time that happens," I said, you call me immediately. I said, "You put the phone on speaker and you let it sit on the chair." You know, and so these are the experiences that we have to teach our children about. And so when I talk about PTSD, and seeing these emotions running through the pictures and the videos that we saw throughout the Black Lives Matter protests, my son, you know, always tells that when a cop comes up behind him, his heart starts racing. He's not doing anything wrong. But why is that the case? Why does he have to be anxious? Why does he have to be scared? You know, if my husband doesn't make it home from work on time, I'm nervous. Just because there was a time where he got pulled over, you know, just for a routine traffic stop, but they pulled him out his car, had to take off all his socks and shoes, sit on the curb, search his car. He's coming home from work. You know, so all of these things go through my mind in terms of what we have to experience. And I have 3 more little boys coming up and knowing what they have to experience. So that Black Lives Matter protest also led to me doing a special for ABC that aired about nationally called Being Black in America, Our America. And so, but it brought about a lot of emotions in terms of, you know, just the future for what our kids have to endure and the trauma that they have to experience on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, the anxiety, the panic, you know, that just shouldn't have to happen. And it saddens me, but I feel like when we build those relationships with our local law enforcement, and that's something that I strive to do in my city, I meet with the sheriff on a regular basis, so they get to know our kids, they get to know our community, and they get to know their names. That's also something that I try to make sure that happens in our schools. Do you know the school police? Do you have a relationship with them? So we feel trusting of them. And it's not that we're calling for them for emergencies, but we're calling them to celebrate things as well. So we did a lot of stuff with donuts with deputies. They come and give the kids donuts in the morning as they come to school. We did Battle of the Badges, where we play basketball games for Christmas and Thanksgiving against the police, you know. So really trying to build that bridge so that there's trust and they get to know the kids in their community. Because when you don't know your community, things go very wrong in terms of law enforcement.
It's so interesting because I feel like some of these stories are going to be repeated in the sense that we all have this experience. And, you know, I have my sons, I have two boys, 25 and 27, and both are UC Berkeley graduates, but they're still Black men. And so the fear that I live with, the fear, the anger, and the passion of making a change. So the Black Lives Matter protest is so important in the sense that I don't want to hear all lives matter until, like you said, until my son, I feel safe that he can come home at night. It doesn't matter where he is. And I had to show up to school every day where they know me personally. And then now they assume that my children are the exception and not the rule, because all of them are the rule in the sense that they all need to have the fairness of the equity in their education, the equity in their survival. Like their lives are so important and they are devalued. So we have to have that voice. So we have to have the hashtag BLM, because we need you to know that their lives matter. And we can't, it goes back to, we cannot apologize. You cannot justify or say something like, oh, Black on Black crime. White people out here killing police officers way more than Black people. But we have to change the story. And that's why it's important that we keep that in front of us. We have to tell our story in our own way. I cannot have you tell my story by your perception or version. So I think we have to continue to do what she's doing. We have to get out there and get to know them. I'm part of a group in Fresno where we work in the worst part of the community. We work with the police officers because it is such a, the environment is just not safe. And are they doing their job? Not to the extent that they really could, but I'm glad to see the effort. But it takes the community. So what we're doing is like, we got to do this ourselves. They're not going to help us. So we're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to get these allies, whoever wants to come, they can join us. And so I think that is so important for us to continue to build these bridges. So I think that it's essential in understanding that Black Lives Matter. It doesn't matter how we do it. I think that by any means necessary, in the sense that Dr. Brown is doing it her way, I'm doing it my way, but I just cannot rest. I cannot rest. I flipped my whole dissertation because of the deaths of those men. When I just continually hear it. And I remember one Black man was shot by a female police officer. He asked her, "Why did you shoot me?" And she said, "I don't know." That's not good enough. That's not good enough. We know there's blatant racism, but it's that unconscious bias that we're dealing with out there, and that we have to educate. And then we also have to build those relationships and sit in those uncomfortable conversations, have those real conversations with them. So Black Lives Matter, it is a movement, and then they try to take that away from us and twist it, but it's still in my heart. You can call it whatever you want. I could say that it matters. It just matters. It simply matters, and it's never going to go away until change happens on a continuous basis.
When I thought about, the Black Lives Matter movement, the thing that really resonates with me about it is the fact that the revolution is being Twittered and Facebooked. It is everywhere, and it should be everywhere. And I am really, this massive exposure of the systemic racism and the racists. People have been exposed. And I feel as if this, the younger generation and the whole Black Lives Matters movement, with how it is, social media has just taken it to a whole new level. And, people are using their cell phones. And I think that whole process of educating all of us and exposing everything to everyone is absolutely critical. And so for me, the resonating thing is the fact that this culture, this country, you can't hide anymore. Y'all can't hide anymore. And it is time. And, our history is such, and, you can look at the history of revolutions. We're a fairly young country, relatively speaking. So we really, we're getting into the thick of things, because for the longest time, things have not been what we say they are as Americans. And now it's time. And so, this whole process of exposure, tweeting, putting it on your cell phone, everybody getting involved from every aspect of it, I think is fantastic. And it's all over the world. And it should be. So that's kind of the thing that resonates with me about this Black Lives Matter movement, is the fact that it is no longer easy to hide. And that's a good thing.
I appreciate everybody's responses and points of view. I mean, this is just such a phenomenal time to be in. I do have to say that having 2 sons as well, I'm married to a Black man, and 2 daughters who will potentially find mates, it puts me in a place where I am often thinking about how to protect my family, how to protect my children. And this has been very difficult for me. Someone mentioned, I think it was Dr. Brown, mentioned the PTSD. Having PTSD and not being able to watch certain movies on TV or certain things on TV anymore. I can't personally watch certain movies. I don't want to watch certain things anymore, where as a younger person, things didn't necessarily impact me, but today it feels differently. And, it's very sensitive to me. I've always worked in the inner cities. I've always worked with Black and brown children. And I just think that right now what resonates for me is that we are at a place, I think, where our country is at a crossroads, where we are no longer at a place where people are willing to stay silent in their privilege. And I think that's where we've been for a long time, as many people who we considered as allies have been silent in their privilege. And I bet this is one of those times and I've seen people in privilege use that and not stand silent and complicit in it. And that resonates with me.
I don't have a whole lot more to add. Everything that's been said is so true. I have two Black men who are my sons. One of them is here with me. He's 29. And when he says to me he's going to go run, it scares the shit out of me. He just wants to go jog. And I'm afraid to see him leave the house and be a Black man running down the street. That is not cool. And it's not right. And this movement is important. But I went to a film festival a couple of years ago, and there was a film about the Apollo Theater from 1950. And a major scene in that movie was police brutality. That was 60 years ago. Here we are 60 years later, having the same damn conversation and experiencing the same things. It has never let up. And my question for my white colleagues is, why do you have to see a Black man with a knee on his neck to know that racism exists? We've been telling you that. When I saw that the footage of Floyd with all I could think about was remember the dogs and the fire hoses at the Edmund Pettus Bridge? We've seen this before. It's been going on for decades. And so here we are again, having this same conversation over and over and over again. It's exhausting. It's disheartening. It is PTSD-ing. I know that's not a word, but it is. We're all I'm traumatized. There are a lot of things I can't watch. I have, as Erica said, I mean, I have seen Jurassic Park about 50 times just because I know none of that can happen. I am watching Harry Potter instead of Judas and something else because I don't want to see that. I don't want to see any of that. I'm living it. I don't want to watch it. And so those things are real, and it's difficult to be a Black person in America. Although I love this country, I do. It's hard. And so what resonates with me with the Black Lives Matter movement, kind of the same thing that did with you, Kathy. I am so encouraged to see young people out there marching, demanding their rights, being involved. You know, when I was in Atlanta last year when John Lewis died, I thought this is the right time for him to go because he got to see the mantle being passed from the civil rights leaders in his generation to young people who are picking up the mantle and saying, this is not okay with us. This has got to change. That is what I got from this. I'm so heartened to see that. I watched Killer Mike, who I'm like, you know, he was talking about the movement and Black Lives Matter. This brother was so on it. I'm like, when is he going to run for governor? But it's so nice to see younger people who are fired up and who are pushing to make change. It is just my sincere hope that it doesn't just happen in the moment and disappear into the abyss like it always does, because we've been here before. It's not like this has not happened before. This is a really important moment. Somebody said we're at a crossroads. We are. This is an important moment. The problem is that we can't let the crossroads, we can't pass it and allow it just to become a memory like the Edmund Pettus Bridge, become part of history. And the Edmund Pettus, it made a big difference, but why do you have to see people killed on camera in order for you to believe that this is real? It just needs to stop. But this movement is the reason we're having this conversation, and that is heartening to me. But We can't just keep talking about it. We've been talking about it for 100 years.
All right, all very powerful responses. Thank you. Have you yourself ever been a victim of prejudice and stereotypes? And are you able to share one experience with us?
So I think my first moment that I can recall actually came when I was a fourth grader. And, you know, my mom had really good intentions. She worked in El Segundo, in Manhattan Beach. And so she put me in a private school in Manhattan Beach. And honestly, there was no one that looked like me. No one. And as a kid, I didn't think anything of it, right? I didn't think anything of it. I just had my friends and I was playing and, you know, and it is what it is, until the teacher started talking about race and cultures. And it was a white lady, and she kept a picture of Ronald Reagan on her desk. And she was just like, do not talk about Ronald Reagan. This is our president. You know, I didn't know nothing about that at the time, but it's so funny now that I reflect about it. But she was talking about race, and she was going, you know, talking about who ethnicities. And so she was calling out different ethnicities and whose background. And she got to Irish, and I raised my hand. And she was like, put your hand down, Adana. And I'm like, why? And she's like, I said, you said who has Irish in them. I said, my grandfather's Irish. She was like, you put your hand down. And so I went home and I'm like, Mom, she doesn't want me to be related to her. And so, you know, it was at that moment that I told my mom, I said, you know, I started to realize my own consciousness as a 10-year-old. And I told her, I said, Mommy, please let me go to my neighborhood school with all my friends, you know. And it was like all Black school. And I'm like, Mommy, I want to go to school with all my friends. I don't want to be there anymore. And so it was, I think it was in that moment that I really realized that there was I was different than the people that I was going to school with, you know. And so I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I started learning about my own culture. Teachers taught us the Negro national anthem, you know, and so I use that as a teachable moment, because we're so quick to ship our kids off and put them on a bus to schools outside of what we think is better. And Dr. McKenna always says this all the time. For those of you who know Dr. McKenna, very powerful. But he says, you know, we're so quick to think everything is better outside of our city, or putting our kids on a bus is better, not knowing that they're not getting treated the way they should be treated when we ship them off somewhere else. And so it's so important to embrace our community, because you don't know who's treating your kid any kind of way when they get to those schools and teaching them whatever they want to teach them. And your kid may or may not have that passion or fire or big mouth like I had to come back and tell my mom, look, this is not right. This don't feel right. So that was my moment.
I love your story. I can see that happening. It's kind of like when I found out I was 17%. Was it from definitely not Black, but 17% from, I think it was Eastern Europe. So I was like, okay, we already know why. But my experience with prejudice and racism, honestly, in growing up in Los Angeles and being in South Central Los Angeles at the time in the 80s, we were just dealing with gun violence. So I didn't really have that issue, because it was mostly either 50% Hispanic or 50% Black. That was my school at the time. So that's all I knew until I went to Fresno and majored in English. And I felt safety in the EOP program because everyone looked like me. But then in my classroom is where one of my first English classes when I was a sophomore, starting to take my English classes as I needed to for my degree. And I was just continually getting like these D's and F's on my paper. And I'm talking to the teacher, and I'm looking at this white athlete I felt like he couldn't even write his name correctly. And he just kept getting A's and B's. And I'm like, we're in a small group and I'm seeing what you're doing. And this does not make sense. And so it just, you know, created that anger in me, but I still didn't have the full understanding because it was the first time I experienced it. So I was able to look back on it. And so when I I did a national student exchange program, and I said, I wanted to have an experience of what it would be like to go to an HBCU. So I went to Alabama State through the National Student Exchange Program. And boy, did I come back militant. I was like, I'm angry as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. So it was a rough last year to finish up at Fresno State because I was just done with people. I'm like, I'm not gonna handle this anymore. I'm gonna fight for my rights. And so that was a challenge for me because I really just didn't have the understanding when you're in a bubble like that, and we were just dealing with safety, so I wasn't really dealing with race. We didn't understand it. And so that's one of the reasons why I even picked USC, because I started teaching when I was teaching with my master's degree. I was teaching in the School of Business. Because I teach, like, I always say, the soft side of business, organizational development, individuals in the organization. And I remember I was teaching a research class, and I usually sit down with my students, especially if we're doing research papers, we're talking about, if they're going through like their chapter 2 or something like that. And another professor would walk in the room. They never assume that I'm the professor. They never assume that I'm Dr. Cochran. So my father growing up, my father would always tell us, put a handle on it when you have, with adults, if it's like she an auntie, a Mrs., a ma'am, or whatever, you're gonna put a handle on it. So I always say, you're gonna Dr. Cochran, because I earned that. And I even chose the school because I know in the Central Valley, where I was working, they were looking at these degrees, and they always, when it came to the people of color, they would have a hard time saying, no, we don't accept that particular school. And I'm hearing these conversations. So people, applications would come through, and if they were white, they were fine. But if it was a person of color, they were really critiquing every little thing. So it just made me very hyper aware of who I am, what I represent, and then honestly, the letters behind my name. And so it made me angry, but it makes me also say, like, I have to talk to my students. I want them to experience HBCUs, but I also know that we have that racism and the things that they have to deal with because of that. So I take it very seriously when I see it happen, because I know what it felt like to be the victim of that. And then honestly, that was probably nothing compared to some of the things that our kids go through right now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel as if, as brown people, we live systemic racism every day, all day, is what I feel like. I have to tell you. I mean, I'm thinking about one particular incident. I'm like, there's too many. It's just too much. But I would like to tell a reverse story in a way, and kind of out myself, because, Dr. Cochran, I know about South Central. I used to work over at Challengers Boys and Girls Club off of 51st in Vermont. And I actually did some stuff over at Manual Arts way back in the day. But when I was one day working there, I was starving, but I was like, I am not gonna stop and eat at 6 o'clock in the evening in South Central. I'm gonna go home to Norwalk where it's safe. Listen now, this is my thoughts. I'm putting myself out there because this is a thought process here, because this is some deep stuff. So I go home to Norwalk and I stop at the Denny's that is literally around the corner from my house at that time. Armed robbery. I am on the floor and they're shooting in the ceiling, all of that. And the robbers are coming through, getting everybody's stuff. I'm on the floor in one of my favorite outfits that got ruined. And the guy with the gun said, "Not you, sister, not you." And I was like, Jesus, I get to keep my stuff because I'm a Black woman. So I tell that story because this racism is so ingrained and so pervasive that they have it so twisted that we are afraid of our own selves. And, that was a lesson for me. It's like, look, as a Black person, I'm not really safe anywhere, but, just that thought process of what we go through on a day-to-day basis. And, when you talk about thinking about our children, when our children leave the house, I've got a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. And so, you are nervous for them. And the fact that we have to go through these hijinks in our head, talk about PTSD, it's insane. So I would just say that, when we think of stereotypes, I just kind of wanted to tell that story because I do think it's important to have that conversation, and you got to unpack who and what you are. You have to unpack all that stuff that gets so ingrained in your head. And we have to do that and create programs for our candidates that helps them know who they are, so they can in turn help all of our children.
So I think I'll share my experiences as an undergrad student majoring in biochemistry. Again, being the only Black student in my class was always interesting every semester, even if I was in higher ed, upper division, biology and chemistry classes. I remember every semester, didn't matter if it was OChem, PChem, advanced physics, I was always the last person that had a group. Whenever the teacher would say, let's break out in groups, you know, everybody else went with what they knew. And, you know, I'm not gonna say that was racism outright, but I think the fact that I was Black had something to do with it. I would also say that I experienced microaggressions as a student from faculty on what's seen as a regular basis. It seemed like every time the semester started and they would call roll and get to my name and look at me, the question would be, are you sure you're in the right class? How would I accidentally get into advanced biochemistry on accident? And it never failed. Multiple times throughout the years, you know, it was like a disbelief that I was sitting in those classes. And so, although not overt racism, the microaggressions were real. And I think that those are just as hurtful as some of the overt experiences of racism as well.
Erica, I have a similar experience. I mean, when Rod Page was the Secretary of Education, he called it the tyranny of low expectations. And I remember there are a lot of incidents, but I remember the first one. I was in junior high school, and I don't know if anybody remembers those boxes they used to have, the SRA cards in them, where you read at the level, you know, you're a purple group or a pink group or a green group. So the year that I went to junior high school was the year they decided we're going to teach everybody at their reading level. And so they had the SRA program, they had us take this test. And remember, I am a lover of books. So I scored really high on that test, and they thought I cheated. So they made me take the test again. And when you take a test twice, I already took it once, so I know what it looks like. So my score got higher, and they made me take it 3 times. The third time, while somebody stood over me to try to intimidate me, and my score got higher again. And so that was an example of low expectation for me, didn't believe it, but it's that reverse thing, Kathy. What I thought from that moment forward was, you know, underestimate me at your peril. Go ahead, think I can't do it, watch me. And so it motivated me. It was like, really? But the whole idea that you think that I could sit in a room full of 25 people, 11 years old, and cheat on a standardized test just because I performed better than you expected me to. That was the first experience I had with it, and it shapes you.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your stories and experiences. Our next question is pertaining to motherhood. What does motherhood mean to the Black community, and who is a mother figure that you would like to pay tribute to?
So I'll tell you a story. When I was a principal, one of my sons was a student at the school where I was a principal at that time. And so every morning I would get on the PA and tell the students, you know, good morning, have a great day, you know, you're amazing. I would get on there and give them positive affirmations. And so lunchtime, an issue happened where it was a fight started, but it also almost created a riot campus wide. So when the kids got back into class after lunch, I got on the PA and I said, teachers, I need everybody quiet in your class. And so I got on there and I said, let me tell y'all something. I said, let me tell you what you're not getting ready to do. You're not getting ready to tear up my campus. I said, if you tear up my campus again like this, I said, this will be the last day you're going to be a student at this school. I said, so as much as I care about all of y'all, I said, you must have lost all of your mind. I said, engaging in what you just engaged in on this campus. I said, so just think about whether you want to still be a student here. And so it's so funny. So a group of Black girls came up to me after school while I was doing supervision and said, Dr. Brown, you smart girl, but you a gangster and we are not gonna mess with you again. And so it's so funny because, I tell my parents that I said, when you drop your kid off, I'm their mama, and you trust me to give them the best education that I'm gonna give, and you trust me to correct them like any mother would. And so that's what motherhood means to me, taking every kid under your wing, treating them as your own. We have to correct. We have to, be the healer, the teacher, the planner, the cook. We're the everything for the community. When I lived in the community where I was a principal. So when I saw the kids acting up, they were straight up like, here go Dr. Brown. I'm like, you guys aren't in school, but but they already, they knew, because that's the respect that they gave adults, and that's the respect that I demanded from them. When they were in public, because no matter where you are, you're representing your family, you're representing who you are, and it's about integrity. So that was my word for them every single day: integrity. When no one else is watching, are you doing the right thing? And I think I owe that to my mother. My mother was not an educator, but my mother was as real and as raw as it gets. She is still as real and raw as it gets. She'll say anything. And sometimes I gotta be like, Mama, you can't say that out loud because we're gonna be fighting up in here, and I ain't ready to fight. Like, I got my nails done, my hair. So you're gonna have to just tone that down, old lady. And we laugh about it. But she'll say, I'm like, Mom, like, come on, like, these people they about to get with us right now. I need you to be quiet. But my mom is like that. She'll tell me how, she'll feel like, I remember one time I was 13 and I had on red lipstick, and she couldn't stand red lipstick. Coming from the South, that just wasn't a thing you wore. And she was like, let me tell you something about that red lipstick. And she said it so harsh and grotesque, I can't even repeat what she said to me, what my lips look like. And I said, Mama, did you have to say it like that? She said, if I say it nice, you gonna do it again. So I'm gonna say it like that so you won't ever do it again. And child, I ain't never wore red lipstick to this day.
Oh, I love it. What motherhood means to the Black community is first a healthy dose of fear, and then I was thinking about safety, belonging, and a voice and love. Because when I think about our kids in the communities or in the school system, and it's sad to say though, when they find that black teacher, that female teacher that listens, that cares, that's where that safety is, and that trust is built there. And so even in the communities where they're not really safe, it's something about these women who walk around and not only to take care of their kids, but they are also looking out for you as well. And so even though I love what Dr. Brown said, was even when you talk crazy to them, they know you love them. So it doesn't matter what you can say. You can talk as crazy as you want. They be like, Miss Brown love me. It's like, it's just, and she gangster, so I think that's what it really means to them. Because I think about my sons, most of their parents were working, like the mothers, the fathers, they were working. I was flexible with my job. So I have a ton of kids at my house. And it wasn't even, I didn't have to do much. It was just that they wanted to be there. It wasn't nothing special about my house. I wasn't cooking because I don't like to cook. So y'all, here's some hot dogs and some bread and some lemonade, have at it. But they wanted to be there. And so I think that's that feeling that they get of safety, and that someone hears me makes a big difference. And I feel like that's what they hear when you think about motherhood in the Black community. And for me, I pay tribute to, it's something that Cicely Tyson, now, she had one daughter, you don't talk about her much, there's not much about the story about her, but she set a precedent and why she chose the role she chose. And there was one that she had helped produce. I think she talked about it in one of her last interviews prior to her passing. And she talked about this, the producer loved what everything was going, and he said, the son called the father daddy. And the producer had a problem with that. And she said, well, what does your son call you? And he said, daddy. And she said, that's a problem. They don't see us as human. And so it's like every woman who has played a role as mother, which is nurture or care, or you see them as something in the Black community, that makes the difference. So tribute to her, but but of all, it was my mother too. I cannot go without saying, because when she passed like 14 years ago, they spent 5 hours. These are things I didn't even know about my mother. 5 hours. No one has a wake for 5 hours. That's just too much time. Let's just shut it down. But so many people showed up in the community, because this is South Central, in the community, but just had to say something. Just had to say, well, she did this for me. Nothing that we even knew. She was there for me. She helped to keep my lights on. She showed up for this. And there's a lot of mothers just like that. So it's a tribute to Cicely Tyson for the roles that she played to my mother, and for all those mothers that do that. And some of them don't even have children.
Yeah, thank you both. What you said is so on point. And, I feel for, the Black community, you look at history, and one of the things that I studied when I was at the Air Force Academy was the art of war, and how places or how countries subjugate other countries or other peoples. And one of the things that they do, kind of like the scorched earth policy, is they take out all the men. One of the first things you do is you neutralize a group of people by taking away all their men. So historically, we have our men are over, totally incarcerated, in levels way beyond others. And economically, the economic inequality kind of takes them out of the equation as breadwinners. So in the Black community, historically, the mothers have been the ones who have still been left there and have kind of been the glue in much the same way as our churches are. So, when I think about that, I think about that historical context. But then on a personal level, I think about how every teacher, every Black teacher was a mother figure to me. Something about, women of color and that nurturing spirit that has just stayed with us from the beginning. It has stayed with us, and we take care of every child, every person that we see has a need in the community. And so I would just like to say, thank you to every Black female and every brown female that had ever been a mother figure to me. And I would really like to say, as a special ed teacher, I can't say how many kids, me and my colleagues have had to feed, have had to clothe, all of that. And so I want to say to every teacher out there, thank you for being that nurturing, mothering type of spirit. And that's not to say that men cannot be, because I've seen many men handle this, many Black men handle this. But since questions about moms, I just wanted to say it that way.
I think for me, motherhood in the Black community represents a carrying of burdens. Really, being strong, being all-knowing. It's a lot of stress being a mother. And some of us mothers have been mothers and pseudo fathers. I say that, I know that we can never take the place of the father in the home or the father in the lives of our children, but it does matter when a woman has to step up and take the role of an absentee parent. I know I've been a single mother at one point in time as well. And so I understand, and I'm able to speak to my parents when they come to the school site in that way, in which we understand that my purpose is their purpose, and that's for the betterment of their children. It's funny, when I have orientation at the beginning of every school year, I ask the parents in the audience, how many of you would like to see your child go to college? And I'd have to say almost all of them stand up and raise their hands and clap. So all of this myth that, we don't want our children to succeed, we are not a part of our children's lives, I think is myth in some ways, and that, we don't necessarily have all the resources in our communities. And so I think being a mother means, and motherhood means finding those resources to support our children. And so that's what I do as the mother of my students at my school. You know, I have a similar story to Dr. Brown. I mean, it just resonates with me. I remember I had two girls fighting one time, and I mean, this was the second fight, because the first fight, the girl got beat up. I'm sorry to say, she got beat up. She got tore up, and she wanted to come back and get hers. And this is the get back fight. And they waited all day long until the bell rang to cut up in the senior choir. And it's these two young women, Black young women, on the ground, and no one else is breaking up the fight. And I don't know what I was thinking that day, but I walked up to this fight, and I literally, I don't know, the Lord must have been by my side, because this was all in slow motion. I put my hand on the young lady who was on the ground, and I put my right hand up in front of the lady who was beating her up. And I looked her in her eye, and I said, "You better not hit me, or else we're gonna have a problem." And she looked in my eyes, and she stopped. And and from that day on, the kids were, Dr. Thomas not afraid to break up no fight. So y'all better stop. Y'all better quit. She ain't afraid. She ain't afraid to break up no fight now. Y'all need to cut it out, because Dr. Thomas ain't afraid to break up. Y'all better go do that out there, because Dr. Thomas, she ain't afraid to break up no fight. So, you know, in all actuality, I don't want to get hurt. I never did. I don't think I'm Superwoman, but when the kids are in trouble, you know, that's what we're there for. And so for me, that's what motherhood means. It's really all encompassing, and there is no one set word or definition to describe it.
I don't know that I ever thought of it as motherhood until you asked this question. But I know for me, if you're a Black woman, a Black child, everybody belongs to me, and I got your back. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I got your back. I care about you. I care what happens to you. And I have reached a point in my career where I will fight for you, because I'm not worried about what's going to happen to me now. But I can fight for you. And so I do think that being a Black woman and a Black mother influences everything. And it influences how you mentor people. It influences how you respond to people. And you know, that's who I am, I guess. And it's my mother. My mother was loud. She was crazy, really crazy, and very religious and crazy, which is the craziest kind of crazy. And she had your back. She had my back. She believed in me, and she believed in everybody around her. And I learned that from her, that, you know, everybody has worth, everybody has potential, and it depends on what we do in our leadership roles, whether a lot of the kids around us are ever going to meet their potential. Sometimes they have people at home to help them, sometimes they don't. And as someone who cares about literacy, as I've said before, I always believe that, you know, we talk about how we have kids who can't read and families who can't read. And my response to that is always, then what is the village for? Because if that mother can't read, somebody there can read. And so we need to take care of those kids. And that is, that's what motherhood means to me. It means your kids are my kids. And if you are a young person, whether you are 29 or 9 and you need something, I got you.
Such wisdom in the room. Thank you. In the audience, we have pre-service teachers, practicing teachers, and people who are just interested in education and want to learn from you. What advice would you give to teachers, lecturers, professors regarding Black students?
I would say take the time to get to know them, each and every one of them individually. Start each conversation every day as they come through the door, as you encounter with them, with what their goal is for the day. How close are you to getting to your goal, whether it's a short-term goal, long-term goal, and how can I help you get to that goal? don't cut their legs from them by lowering your expectations. But at the same time, push them, to not be, not to the point of being overwhelmed, but allowing them grace. It's about empathy, not sympathy. We don't want to feel sorry for them, but we want to be empathetic. We also want to be, don't assume. I see a lot of teachers, especially Black teachers. We do this to our own children. We assume things that they have at home. We assume they have homework, a mother to help them with their homework. We assume they have, a stable place to live or place to study. And so we make these generalizations about what should be happening at the house. And so I would say, don't single them out in that interest. That becomes very embarrassing. Don't focus on their deficits. Focus on what they have to offer, because every child, no matter where they are in their journey, has something to offer to that class. Don't silence them. And allow them to think differently. Sometimes when students challenge teachers with their thoughts or their ideas, or challenge their professors, we get into these power struggles with kids, and that therein lies the issues that we start to have, or where kids get put out or things like that. Allow them to bring that new perspective. Allow them to challenge, but respectfully, and what that looks like. And say it's okay to disagree. It's okay that you have your own method. Let's talk about that and validate their thoughts. It's important about validating who they are, what they think, where they come from, and establishing that respect. And the last thing I will say, the most important thing for no matter where you are in your, whether you're a teacher or educator, higher ed, whatever, be their voice. Be their voice in rooms that they aren't present. And that's how I always operate. At the end of the day, when I leave a meeting, whether it's with the superintendent or with LA County, whoever it is, I always say, did I advocate for the people who can't advocate for themselves in this room today? If I didn't do my job, because I need to make sure that they are heard through me, because I need to tell their story, and I need to tell it unapologetically.
So just on point right there. I feel like I'm just repeating everything she said, but just in a different way. I believe it is very important to know our kids' story of origin, not just because like we like she said, we clump them together. We put like, oh, just because you live in a community, we assume you have a mother at home. We assume you don't have a father at home. We assume a lot of things. So get to know that child and learn their story. And then I would say expect excellence from them, because they will rise up to the challenge if you walk with them. And then be patient, because it takes time for trust to be built. And that's anyone who is working with a Black student. It doesn't have to be a Black teacher. Anyone working with Black children, or even students of color, be patient. And like she said, the empathy needs to be there. And I was like, we have to empower our kids, and then do the difficult work of spending time and getting to know them, because you have to go. It takes extra work. It really does. And there's nothing wrong with that, because they were not afforded certain things and they don't know certain things. So be willing to do the extra work, getting the information, taking the extra time out, because it's time well spent. And in that way, so yes, if they are look past how they talk, look past how they write, because they might not have been afforded certain opportunities, but be patient and walk with them on that journey. Just, don't give up on our kids. And it doesn't matter, and get beyond your own story, because what happens is we tend to tell their story through our own experience. And that's not fair, because you don't know what they've gone through. You don't know where they've been, and you don't know their story from their experience. So let them tell their own story. And then when you get the permission to share it, like you said, because they're not going to be in the rooms, we have to be the advocates. We have to have the voice. Because I love what Dr. Washington said, she don't care now. Like, look, I've already been there. I can speak up for them. And so we have to be the ones that can speak up for them when they can't.
You're absolutely right on point, all of you. There's a quote, and I'm not even sure where I got this quote from way back in the day, but it says, I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. And I say that because the relationship is everything. That foundation on knowing our students. But before we know our students, we have to know ourselves, and we have to know our own biases. We have to know what our issues are and how we are looking at that child, so that we can understand that how we see that child can mean everything in the relationship that we build with that child. So knowing and unpacking your biases is, I think, critical to building that foundation and that relationship in that classroom, so that you are absolutely that child's advocate. And I think, going along with motherhood in a way is, like what Dr. Washington was saying, I think that women of color, we are honest. We are brutally honest. And there are different types of styles of motherhood. But when you are real with a student, students know when you care. No matter how you talk to them, they know exactly when you care and when you don't. And so I would just say, when you are working with students, with our Black children and our brown children, know who you are, know what your biases are, and really, really work hard to get to know those students and where they're from. You can never make the assumption that because a student acts a certain way, that you know exactly what that reason is. You need to dig and you need to find out.
I would say that the two things that I could say that I think are the most significant is, number one, don't be afraid of our kids. Don't be afraid of Black and brown kids. They're kids. And you need to understand that they're coming to learn from you, and they know when you care. That just like has been shared before, they know when you haven't prepared your lesson. They know when you are not teaching what you should be. And they know all those things. They know. They'll tell on you, because I have had many kids come to me and say, Dr. Thomas, when are you gonna fire such and such? Because they're not teaching. They only were doing that when you came in the room. Yet, Dr. Thomas, and they'll say it out loud. So they'll call you on it. But don't be afraid of the kids. The second thing I would say is embrace your differences. If you're not a Black person, it doesn't mean that you cannot teach and have a relationship with Black children. If you're not a Latino person, it doesn't mean that you cannot teach and have a relationship with Latino children. Embrace your differences. Embrace it. Use them as teachable moments. If you don't know all the slang, that's okay. It's okay that you don't know all the slang. Learn some. It's perfectly fine. The kids have to code switch every day. We talk to them about academic language. They know when they're in your class, it's academic language. When they're outside, it's hood street 101 talk, okay? Learn some, get to know the kids. It's really, relationships are so key right now, and if you can get kids to share a part of who they are, that's half of your battle right there. That's half of your battle. If you can walk into a classroom and when a kid is having a bad day, because traditionally that kid isn't, and you can say, hey, I know you're having a bad day, but I really need you to do this for me. And that kid says, you know what? My bad. You're right. Or you know what? I need to go outside because I'm just not feeling well. Or you know what? I need some assistance later on. Can I talk to you later? And you being able to acknowledge the situation as it is, as a situation, not with your unintended biases impacting those students. So those are the two major things that I can say. Don't be afraid of our kids, and embrace our differences and use those as teachable moments.
I have spent my whole career in higher ed, so I'm going to address a mistake that we often make in higher ed. And that is this idea of getting to know your students. Get to know your students as individuals. Don't treat them like members of a group. That's one of the big mistakes we make in higher ed. When I will never forget, when I was at the University of Michigan, I was mentoring a student. It was a Black woman. She was a freshman. And she said to me, when I asked her how things were going, she said, I thought I was smart until I got here. I had a good GPA. I always did well at school. And as soon as I got here, they put me in tutoring, started talking to me about all the support that I would need. And it was like, because she was Black, not because she needed it, but they identified these are programs for Black students. So they threw everybody in there. She didn't really need the programs, and they broke her down by doing that to her and made her feel like she was less than. And she had the right response though. She said, they're treating me like I'm dumb and like I'm not gonna make it. I'm going to Spelman. And she left. And that was to what you said, Adana. It was like, I'm going to a Black school where people are not judging me as part of a group. And, you know, the university's intent was to be helpful and to be supportive, but your Black students and your brown students are individuals. They are not just a Black group. And so treat them like individuals and get them to know as individuals. So if someone really needs help, you can point them to the resources that are available, but don't just assume that everybody in the group needs to go there. And I learned so much from her, and I know it's a mistake we make a lot as higher educators.
Thank you again for your thoughts and wisdom, for helping us help our Black students. We only have about 15 minutes left in the webinar. And so our last question is, what gives you hope? And I want to ask you that. And also, like, if there's any last pressing thoughts that you want to share with the audience, go ahead and share that as well.
I would say what gives me hope is that our kids right now are currently more woke than we have ever been, right? They are living in the middle of their own civil rights movement, and it is our job to make them realize that they are in the middle of a movement, you know? And so when I listen to my son talk to his friends, you know, about stocks and investing and, you know, what's going on with the insurrection, and you know, I'm listening to their consciousness about it, and it gives me hope, like I said, because these are not things that we particularly would have talked about. We missed the moment when they had the riots in the 90s. Our parents had that moment in the 60s, but here we are again with a chance to do something different. And so when I see that, when I see the kids code switching, they're getting it. When I see them mix academic grit with street grit, they realize their power. Nobody has more power than a Black child who can survive on the streets and who can survive in an academic white institution, right? You know, so that gives me hope, because now I have more to bring to this relationship than anybody else, because I've lived through all of this, you know. And so I get hopeful because our kids have so much that they're seeing and taking in, but it's up to us to help them filter that and not shield them from it, so that we say, okay, don't watch that. We don't want you to know about it, you know, but they have a chance to see what was left out of the history books. January 6th showed us what was left out of the history books. It was what needs to be in it, right? You know, the Black female who created the Moderna vaccine, that was what was left out of the science books, that we just had new science books rewritten. So it's a chance for our kids to really see, this is me, this is my history, I'm making it, I'm living it, and I'm not going to be quiet about it. And we can no longer be silent about it. And it's okay to not be silent and not worry about the repercussions, because now everybody sees what was on display nationally on January 6th.
All right, Dr. Brown, just stop stealing my words.
Great minds think alike, girl.
I am hopeful because they are ready for a revolution. They are a movement. They will not go gently into that good night. They are not playing. Our kids, they have a fire and a flame that cannot be extinguished. So when they see what's happening to them, it just grows even more. So I just want to help guide them. I just want to help be a part of that. So they encourage me because I have gotten, you know, the silence was deafening at times. And now we see our kids, you know, I still think about that TikTok thing with Trump and how those young people got on there and registered for that thing, and no one showed up. I mean, brilliant. Like they're using their devices, they're using social media, and they're making change happen. I mean, there have been revolutions across the world because of text messages and Twitter feeds, and they are doing it. They're using what they have now, and they're making the changes that we try to do in different ways, in different formats when we had our different access. So when you see when you look at the pictures from the Million Man March, and then now you look at the Black Lives Matter marches, and you see the sea of people and young people doing something and wanting to make change. I'm inspired and I'm a little scared. That's how I feel when I watch my kids, when I watch them do these things. I'm just like, what? But I want to be a part of it. They make me want to be a part of it. So I'm hopeful when I see that fire. And so, and I'm hopeful when they sit and want to listen to our stories, because that's I listen to my parents' stories, so that's the foundation. So they're building on something, and I see, you know, how they say, you know, old men have vision, young men dream dreams. I see the vision set before us of how they're making the change happen, and I'm proud, and I just want to be a part in any way I can to help them get this going.
Yeah, I am, you know, the whole globalization of this movement and the resurgence of the popularity of the spoken word as an art form. That gives me so much hope, because they're putting, you know, young people are putting things into words, and, you know, this resurgence of storytelling and listening to the stories so that we can learn from our past and still kind of carry it into the future. And again, social media, I just can't say enough about how much hope that gives me. I mean, my daughter and I were watching a movie last night, and it was produced in Nollywood, not Bollywood, but Nollywood, which is out of Nigeria. They are second behind Bollywood in movie productions in the world, which I'm sure nobody, I mean, who knew, right? And again, but because this movement has gotten such traction and has been globalized, we are seeing a resurgence, or actually just an enabling of a whole bunch of content from people of color that we have never ever seen before. It is out there now for everybody to watch and to see, all levels of brilliance in genres, and how that is telling the story of our people, and how it's telling the story of how we have to fight all of these inequalities around the globe, because they're all, and we are all connected. And I think that is a beautiful thing. And that gives me a lot of hope.
I think for me, as a school site educator for over the last 22 years, what gives me hope is that universities, teacher preparation programs, doctoral programs, master's programs in education are having these conversations and are actually dealing with, instead of ignoring, race and equity in their programs. You know, I'm hopeful that these attempts are going to lead to fruition, and educators who are mindful about how they are going about teaching Black and Brown youth, or just minority youth in general. You know, we speak of Black and Brown youth, but, you know, minority children all across the nation are dealing with and facing some of the same biases that our Black and Brown children are dealing with us too. When we talk about, you know, our Cambodians, you know, we talk about some of our other lower performing Asian populations. You know, it's just really, it really sheds light for me that, you know, as educators, this is front and center for us.
I think I'm just going to echo what these ladies said. I am humbled by and really proud of young people right now, and I see hope in them. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And that's what they're doing. They speak up. They're not shy about it. They know what they want, and they will tell you unapologetically, which I love. And so I'm just, I have hope for the future, because it's being pushed by young people, and it's Black people pushing their own story. Young Black people pushing what they want instead of just having things decided for them. They really do have a voice that I never had at their age. And I was a loudmouth. I talked all the time, and I always have been, and have always been, you know, focused on what's right, but not until I got older was I willing to say the kind of things they want, that they're saying, because I thought it was too risky. And they're willing to take the risk. And that gives me hope. And so I'm happy, I'm humbled. And if there's anything, you asked us if there was anything we wanted to say. The thing that I want to say is that this was a great session. It was really great to meet all of you. Dana, I'm calling you on Monday, but but I also want to say it's not our job to educate everybody else. And so although I'm happy to be here, happy to have the conversation, happy to have people listening, I'm the victim of the trauma. I shouldn't have to educate you about my trauma. We're all educators, and everything we want to know, we go find out. If you care about this, you'll learn about it. You won't wait for me to come to you and tell you about it, because that's exhausting for me. And I don't want to keep doing it. So I am happy to have this conversation, particularly with, you know, like-minded women, but some of the impetus is on you to, assimilation is all one-sided. The education is all one-sided. If you want to be equitable, let's be equitable in learning about racism and overcoming it. Don't make me come to you and tell you what needs to be done, not my fucking job.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Thank you for wrapping that up. I appreciate the honesty and the truth shared by each of our panelists. I appreciate the vulnerability. This is not easy to be educating the educators, but and we have quite a task and challenge ahead of us. But I mean, we're always better together. And you know, I appreciate our panelists agreeing to do this. Susan and I don't always know who the panelists are, and they've never seen or met us before. And it's, you know, they might have some hesitancy to say, oh, they asked us to speak on a panel, what panel? And they just, so you took the risk, and I think it paid off well. And Susan, I don't know if you have any last words that you want to say.
So hopefully not the last words, but I, like you, Acacia, I'm so honored to have been in this Zoom with all of you, and for you to share your wisdom and experiences with me and the other educators in the audience has been invaluable. So thank you so much.
So if there's any comments that our participants want to share, you know, I see the chat, feel free before we close out. Whatever's on your mind, just we appreciate your time as well. It's not always easy to give up time on a Friday evening after a long week, but we appreciate you, you know, valuing this time to hear from our panelists. So that's equally special for us. So thank you. Yeah, I don't know if our panelists want to say anything or.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's been an honor to even to be asked and to come and just to see these beautiful Black educators here doing the hard work. So thank you for even just offering the invitation for me to come and join them in this conversation. And it's so interesting about how closely our stories are similar, and then how they're a little different. So that was just, you know, we all have a story to tell, and I'm glad that we were able to share that here today.
Yep, ditto. Thank you so much. I was absolutely excited to meet all of you. And you know, it's so funny. It's a really, really small world. I mean, I feel as if, you know, I've probably crossed paths with each of you somehow or another.
Absolutely. I just want to say same thing, echo what everybody said. This was great. Love the dialogue. Love getting to the format of it as well, and being a part of it. So thank you for having me here with all of you today in your presence. So that was great.
Thank you, Acacia, for putting this together. It was
Yes.
very nice.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a lot of work, but it's all worth it. Oh, it's so worth it. So, all right. Well, with that, I hope everyone has a good evening. Be safe, and be well.
Okay, I'll put my
Yes.
email in the chat just in case.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If the panelists feel comfortable doing that, go ahead. We are recording this, and I'm putting a link. Next week, we'll upload the video to our MAT website. So if you're wanting to see the recording, we will do that. Okay. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening. Signing off for our Voices in Perspective series.
Thank you,
all.
Acacia.
Thank you, Susan. Bye.